we've got a different message. We have a message point that says you have legal rights as truck drivers, right? There are people that will stand up for you.
Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back. It's been a little while. Interesting episode here for you today. I met my next guest at Matt's Mid-America Truck Show. This gentleman is a lawyer, and he has a firm down in Atlanta, Georgia called Long Haul Law. And we had a pretty interesting conversation about, trucks being involved in collisions and what it's like to, deal with these cases. It was similar to my previous guest, Grant, from out in Wyoming. But in this one, my guest, Jeremy, focused a little bit more on the sort of perception of truckers on the part of the public and thus on juries in, cases where, lots of money and people's lives have been on the line. And also Jeremy's ideas around the sort of professionalism that truckers should aim for, and just the general ideas of accountability. I think it was a good little chat. I think you guys will enjoy it. I know it's been a little while. I'm in the final stretches of getting the book finished. So my apologies for not getting an episode out here in the last couple of weeks. I hope you enjoy this one. Please be patient. I got a couple more coming out here real soon. Go check out Jeremy's website, longhaullaw.com. He has another one called thehurtboss.com. He does his law practice covers all sorts of angles. Really lovely guy. Maybe he'll be back at Matt's next year. Not sure. He's very, very informed about all of the issues in trucking. We had a little discussion as well about the sort of driver shortage narrative, which he wasn't 100% clued in on, but he taught me and I taught him a little bit, and it was pretty good. So I hope you enjoy it. Go check him out. Anything you want to say to me, go right ahead. Gordilocks at protonmail.com. If you're not already, go subscribe to my Substack, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. And yeah, let's get to Jeremy Citron. All right, hey everybody. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of Voice of Gord. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. The other voice you're about to hear today is another attorney. You guys would have heard a couple of months back, I interviewed a gentleman from Wyoming named Grant Lawson, who's a sort of attorney that specializes in truck-involved incidents. And I found another one I met recently at Matt's. And we are going to discuss the hows and the whys of what's going on out there on the road, what you can do to protect yourself as a driver, and maybe what companies can do to help weed out all of the bad actors that keep this gentleman in business. So the other voice, please welcome to the show, Mr. Jeremy Citron of the Citron Law Group.
How are you? It's nice to be with you, right?
Yeah, no, thanks for joining the show, sir. I really like the name of your law practice, The Hurt Boss.
Well, that's like what people have been calling me for a long time. The practice we've got that focuses on truck drivers is actually called Long Haul Law. It's even better like message. It's right to what we do. So I appreciate the compliment on both ends, right? They're good brands, for sure.
A very good friend of mine who's also a writer, guitarist, career trucker. His name is Long Haul Paul.
Oh, I
So
love it. I love it. I've got a guy who's a truck driver. We call him Tall Paul because I think he's about 6'7", same kind of concept, right? It's fun.
very good. So, sir, brief intro for my listeners. How long you been practicing law? How did you get into dealing with truck-involved incidents and crashes and whatnot? Tell us your story.
So I've been practicing law now for about 25 years. I know you've got a video. I look like I was a child prodigy when I went to law school at a very young age. Um, and so I started out with one of the largest defense firms in the country and defended cases and quickly wound up realizing it really wasn't for me. I worked with a legal aid at one point, and then I did a lot of criminal stuff for a couple of years and met one of my mentors. And we started personal injury law focused on motorcycle personal injury cases. And at that point, I really found my passion, which was working and helping people. Okay, I was at one point during all of this also. I've been a prosecutor for a local city up here during on a part-time basis, and so all of that formulates for me an ability to really speak with people and understand where people are coming from in their everyday normal lives and how their interactions and engagement with the court system or something along those lines becomes very really kind of throws people into different circles or loops. It creates stress and anxiety, and I'm here to help kind of get people through all of that. Okay, which is why we call ourselves the hurt boss, which is we're the boss of the hurt, right? You're the boss of the hurt that comes at you and the way that you control it. I've moved off for just a second now. So after I was done with the personal injury firm focused on motorcycles, I had kids, and I moved on from that. I decided I was going to use some of the same marketing concepts in the trucking industry, in the trucking world. And so I did, because at that time, that was really when the personal injury lawyers started really focusing on truck accident cases. Okay. And I reasoned at that point that there was going to be a lot of truck drivers that were going to have a lot of need for a lawyer themselves. Okay. And at that point, all of the personal injury uh, trucking focused firms, all of their marketing was aimed at the truck wrecks, aimed at the carnage, aimed at the actions of the truck driver. And nobody was out there saying, hey, there's a guy here who's your friend. Okay, this is stressful for you, the truck driver. You're in a lot of stuff. There's a lot going on. Come talk to me, and I'll kind of start to walk you through it. And so that's how I got into that aspect of it. As it turns out, there's a lot of truck drivers involved in truck accident cases who have lawsuits, and we help them pursue those. There's a lot of truck drivers that get injured when they're making deliveries on somebody else's property, through no fault of their own. There's a lot of situations that these guys find themselves in, and I'm more than happy to talk them through, get them where they need to be. We've seen our share of some interesting stories along the way. So that's how I got into what I'm doing. You know. Um, I just seemed to think that there was a message out there for people and they needed to hear it.
Right. So you said you moved on from doing motorcycles and you got into trucking. What was the sort of initial spark for that? Did you notice a gap in the market? Did you start noticing there was more truck involved incidents? Like what specifically attracted you to start practicing in the trucking industry?
Well, so it's less sexy than that, I'm going to tell you. I had my third child and decided riding a motorcycle was probably not the financially and familial responsibility type of thing to do. And I decided I was going to move on from that as a result. I don't think that you can credibly be a motorcycle personal injury lawyer if you don't really ride a motorcycle and understand what people are, where that goes. Um, but and then I did. I saw a gap in the market. What I saw was a message that's missing in the market. Okay. When all of the advertisement is coming against truck drivers, they really don't think that they have anybody on their side. And even now, the extent of the marketing in that particular sphere is anti-trucker, for the most part, anti-company. We've got a different message. We have a message point that says you have legal rights as truck drivers, right? There are people that will stand up for you. There are, agreements in place with some of the carriers, some of your bosses that you don't know about with the insurance companies, all of these things. But unless there's somebody here that's willing to help you and talk to you about it, so maybe it's a gap in the market, maybe it's a message point that was not being delivered correctly or ever being delivered. But I thought that's really that's what I thought and started out to do.
Yeah, well, as most drivers know, as most people, anybody that drives around knows, everyone's seen the sort of billboards, thus the term billboard attorney, ambulance chasers. There seems to be a whole cottage industry of attorneys that go after trucks that are involved in collisions. I had an insurance industry guy on my show, a year or two ago. It's the only podcast I've had to take down. The mere mention of the name of an insurance company saw this insurance guy get a sort of threat from them saying, "You have your podcaster boy take that down. You mentioned us, and we don't want to be mentioned." Um, so it seems like it's a pretty hot thing, you know. And then we have the issue with like nuclear verdicts. And one of the things I cover on this podcast, or at least I explore, is I come from a trucking family that's been doing this for 3 generations. My grandpa drove truck, my uncles, my dad. I've been doing it since I was in high school, and I quite like trucking. And I've consider myself a fairly professional operator. I've never been involved in a collision or hurt anybody, and it pains me to see this stuff happen. And I also see connections in the background with specific policies on the part of the government. And then, just sort of corporate greed and all kinds of other things that lead to, a higher volume of traffic that uses a lower quality person behind the wheel. And then, then there's the car side of it too, right? Like car drivers are not, to be let off here. But I was just curious if you had any sort of opinions or insights into why it is that we are seeing this sort of like increase in truck involved collisions over the last few years. It's borne out in the data. I have my opinions on that, but I'm curious to know what yours are.
Well, the very first thing I'm going to tell you is we're seeing an increase of collisions of all sorts, especially in certain markets. Most of the markets that we're seeing them in are going to be areas where the interstate system is working and are hubbing. So Atlanta's population growth, for example, I'm sitting here in Atlanta. Our population growth has exploded. And we are a major hub, as you can appreciate, on the interstate system here, 75, 85, 285 rolling around. We're just north of Macon. We're we've got the intermodal stuff coming up from Savannah, as well as the highway systems coming up from Savannah. So this is a big trucking city here. We've got more and more cars on the roadway, okay? Smaller cars that are not seen as well by truckers and truck drivers. They're just smaller. And so you've got a lot of that type of stuff that's driving up accidents in general, as well as the fact that a lot of people took a couple years off from really driving with other people during COVID. And I'm going to tell you, I've noticed a lot of more worse is not really a great way to put it, but a lot more worse driving behavior from people where they cut people off or they get hot tempered with people or the road rage. All of this stuff, I think, is increased from COVID. So I think that is why you're going to see an increase of accidents with truck drivers. I also think that um, I think there's more loads being transported. I'm not sure what's going to happen now with some of the tariff stuff that's going back and forth, because I do understand that that's impacting the truckers, and it certainly can. So that's one reason. There's a different reason for the increase in lawsuits against truck drivers. I mean, you're going to have accidents and you're going to have regardless, okay, the verdicts and the lawsuits that file are driven by just some basic economics, right? Which is the average car in Georgia, for example, the average motor passenger vehicle in probably most of the states, I'd have to look them up, only has to have about $25,000 of insurance on it. Okay. And so, but what's the average? What's the minimum requirement on a tractor? I think if the last time I looked, it was $750,000, right? And the trailer's got to have $750,000 of insurance on it, right? Okay, and usually, sometimes they have more. And so,
Depending on customer requirements and the kind of
yeah,
freight they're
sure,
hauling, yeah.
right. So you guys are a target of opportunity when you're involved in an accident. right? You have got that many more times on a multiple basis what the average car accident is going to be. And so attorneys that recognize those metrics made a specialty out of going out and marketing for those particular cases for that reason. That's the start of it. Okay. Now you've got like some other things that don't play very well. And these are not necessarily true things that I'm about to tell you. But the very first one is I'm going to go back to what we were talking about before this podcast started, which was you brought up Smokey and the Bandit, the last American cowboy, so to speak, is how people sometimes see truck drivers, right? And unfortunately for truck drivers, it's a horrible branding mistake. Okay, because that is a bias that jurors have. Okay, there's no question about it. One of the things like I did not enjoy about motorcycle personal injury accident cases was every time I walked into one of those cases, there was a bias against the motorcyclist. Okay. Oh, they're yahoos. They speed. They cut through lanes. They do wheelies through traffic. All of these things because that's just how people have perceived them. There's movies. There's popular culture. All of this places the bias within people's minds, and we've done that as well with truck drivers. Smokey and the Bandit is like a primary opportunity to look at it. I mean, he's hauling a load illegally, right, of beer across state lines and doing anything he can to get away from like the cops, and it just has that like cowboy yahoo non-professional element to it. The reality is, and I think you'll appreciate this, and by the way, most and very good plaintiffs lawyers that specialize in truck cases absolutely recognize what I'm going to tell you. They recognize how professional almost all of the truck drivers are that are out there. And when you get engaged with these lawyers, the really good ones, they're going to treat the truck drivers with an element of empathy and respect for what they've been put through. Okay. Because a lot of what's going on when the things go really bad, you might have some safety issues with motor carriers. You might have poor equipment that's been assigned out to truck drivers. That happens all the time. You might have unrealistic delivery expectations that you guys have got to start meeting into, all of these things. And so we start looking deeper into how these accidents occurred. And when you start treating people with professionalism, you start using that professionalism to drive how the accidents caused by the the less professional drivers, how they occur. Okay, because by and large, the largest verdicts that you're getting in the country, the what you call nuclear verdicts, I don't call them nuclear verdicts. Okay, I'm just going to tell you, there's a process by which all of these cases go through. These are jury verdicts. These are community decisions. I don't call them nuclear, just like I don't call defense verdicts like unauthorized or unrational. Somehow they were rational to a jury. I'm going to respect the process. Okay. The nuclear verdicts are driven largely by conduct that you don't necessarily know about by less than professional drivers who've engaged usually in some type of actions that are going to inflame the juries to that point. Okay. The other thing I want you to understand is these nuclear verdicts that come out are being ironically driven by your insurance carriers. Okay, because long before those cases get to trial, they've had a lot of opportunity to settle these cases, but the insurance companies would rather push out their arguments, okay, or try their defenses for whatever reason in front of a jury. And by doing so, if they're not right, okay, if they're on the wrong side of things, if they're not coming across credibly or trustworthy in their defenses, they're upsetting juries, and that stuff matters.
Right. That's a very good point. Maybe we can drill down into that a little bit because, as I mentioned, I spoke with another attorney about this, and then I spoke with an insurance gentleman down in Texas. And my insurance guy in Texas had mentioned that an awful lot of these incidents don't even make it to trial because, like, you guys work it out somehow. And I'm just curious, like you mentioned that they're trying things. What benefit does an insurance company have in allowing something like this to go to trial when they've already had negotiations or I'm having a vocabulary failure. oh man, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, oh, it'll come back to me. But yeah, so if you guys are hashing this out before it gets to trial, there's like off ramps to settle this, right? So what would their incentive be to just not settle?
You know, it's it's always going to be on a case by case type of basis, and there's always going to be some type of defense that they can think that they're going to get through. Maybe it's that the plaintiffs are trying to demand too much money. That's always a possibility. Maybe, unfortunately, maybe there's egos on, somewhere involved, something along those lines. Maybe the trucking company doesn't want to admit that they've engaged in some type of safety, something. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons why people want to go to trial. Okay. Um, Ultimately, the benefit to the insurance company is that they feel that they're going to save themselves money somehow by winning. That's the only reason that they should be going to trial. Okay. But there is a point that good plaintiffs' cases will go to trial because the insurance companies won't put enough money on the table. All right. So I want you to understand this. In the world of lawyers that are out there, there's a lot of them. Like just a ton of lawyers, probably too many. Okay. But there's a lot of them. And there's a lot of personal injury lawyers that will take a case and they will never see the inside of a courtroom. Okay. And along the way, they know they're going to hit in that process the right number for them and their client, and the case is going to settle and it's going to go away. And then even in the trucking world, I've got to say that number is probably up about 85 to 90% of cases are just going to work themselves away. But what happens is with really talented trucking attorneys, plaintiffs trucking attorneys, who sit there and they've been in the courtroom a number of times, you're either going to pay them what they need to get paid, or they're going to take you into that courtroom because you forced them into that courtroom. And they know what I feel, which is juries value these cases more than lawyers and their clients do at the settlement stage. Okay. Juries are a phenomenal cross section of people. I see the look on your face, so I'm going to explain this to you. They're the ultimate cross section of people. Okay. They're from all different walks of lives, and they wind up reaching a discussion, having a discussion to reach a verdict, and it's largely a compromise discussion on dollars. But they're coming up with large numbers because that's what we have just come through massive inflationary rates for what, 2, 3 years. Okay. The cost of living for the average American is rising astronomically fast. Okay. And jurors understand that. So when lawyers and their clients are sitting here settling cases based upon notions of what values have been for 10, 15 years, 5 years ago, that is out the window, because the jurors who are sitting there in real time and what life is like and what the hospital expenses are, they get it. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is people are getting to the point where they're really sick of people not being accountable for their own actions. Okay. And um, and juries are empowered to do just that. The reason that we only have dollars and that we get shocked by the concept of a multi-million dollar verdict is because the numbers are so large. But that's the only justice that lawyers are able to obtain for their clients. I want you to think about this. We're not able to go, for example, and get a restraining order against the pain that our client has for the rest of their lives, right? There's not a judge in the world that can do that. The only thing we can get is money for people as a result of what decisions they didn't make and what's happened to them. It's really the most refined version of that old concept, an eye for an eye, right? I mean, we think of that as a very vengeful justice system. It's not. It was a replacing justice system. They recognized the value of what was lost, and they actually tried to replace it for you in the most rudimentary way. You'd never use somebody else's eye. You can't put it in and use it. But that's what that was for. And now we only have dollars as a replacement for what people lost. So that part of it has to stop shocking people. But jurors understand that. And good plaintiffs' lawyers can make jurors understand that. And the jurors, as a result, are really beginning to speak about accountability, okay, and about not wanting to be beguiled by people and arguments that are not credible. And they're also speaking to the real value and costs of this society, which are much higher than we believe them to be. Okay, there's not enough insurance on the cars that drive around in the United States anymore. The concept of a $25,000 minimum limit, while the insurance companies are profiting in ridiculous ways, is arcane. Okay, they need to be higher, and you'd stop seeing as many lawsuits if they were. Okay, I'll be honest with you, you probably need more money on the average truck as well. The tractor should be insured for more than $1.5 million, $750. I'm sorry. Okay.
I want to ask you a specific question about the accountability stuff, right? Because I'm with you. I agree 100%. The problem with trucking is that we see layers of unaccountability put in with the actual operation of trucks, customers, people that are moving loads. So there's been a number of very high profile crashes in the last year. And, you know, some of them are pretty illustrative of what I'm getting at here. So there's this crash in Texas a few months ago, and it involves a subcontractor to Amazon. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's the truck is driven by a guy who just got here. He was only in America for 4 months. Unknown, dubious circumstances how he was issued a CDL. The company who owned the truck he was driving, layers of LLCs registered in Texas and California, and we have this problem with like motor carriers, several of them, hundreds of them being registered to the same address. This guy crashes into stop traffic in Texas, kills an entire family, someone else, 12 people go to hospital. But because they're a subcontractor, Amazon can wash their hands of this. I've been looking into the Amazon thing, and like major media organizations have been as well, right? So you'll have like CBS did a deep dive on this, the Wall Street Journal, and we come to find out in the last 10 years, carriers under the employ of Amazon have killed 150 people on our roads. And Amazon aren't the only ones. FedEx, all these huge, and then big trucking companies now who can't claim they can't get drivers are using subcontractors instead to haul their stuff. And there's just all these accidents happening. And the trucks are often no-name trucking companies owned by layers of LLCs, often employing recent arrivals, migrants, or refugees. And I'm curious to know what your take on that particular trend is as regards when it gets to trial and what the work you do.
All right, so I'm gonna tell you something right now, and I'm not going to name the company because it's not fair. Okay, we're going to try this exact issue on Monday in one of the counties here in Georgia. Okay, what we have is we have one of the last mile delivery companies. Okay, that takes a load from someone else. Okay, and they make those final drop off shipments, whatever. Drop offs to the doorstep is really what it is, and I'm pretty sure that they employed an illegal immigrant. I mean, we've got a New York State license that's not real ID compliant, if you understand what I mean. The little star up in the corner, okay? And it's a layered LLC behind the original motor carrier that took the shipment, that's DOT, all of it certified. Okay. And the reason that we're going to go to trial is exactly the argument that you've laid out, which is this. They're saying, hey, this is an independent contractor. Let's look at our independent contractor agreement with her company and with her. Okay. And we have no control over her. We don't have anything along these lines. And that's what these companies are doing. All right. And the reason that these cases are continuing to go to trial is because they believe that this is a good argument. All right. They believe that they can, based upon the documents and the creation of this relationship that they've done, that they're going to get juries to agree with them. And so the reason, going back to what we were talking about before, that these cases are not settling and you're going to start seeing big verdicts. Okay, I have a friend here in Atlanta that just tried a case against Amazon, and I think they got $16 million out of the trial. Okay. And the reason that it was going to wind up going to trial is twofold. One, they're a specialized truck accident firm. Okay. And number two, Amazon didn't want to relent to this argument that they had an independent contractor out there. And they were able to convince a jury that, hey, when you're controlling these people and every 5 minutes of their lives and the terms that they're making on the app that you make them pay for and use, you do control them and they are your employees. And when you go further with that, okay, and you have an agreement that says that you've got the ultimate right to pull out and make them and fire them essentially if they don't meet your delivery terms or your customer service terms or anything along those lines. You have the ultimate control. You have the ultimate control over that employee. Not to mention the fact that I believe, and I could be wrong, well, I know this is correct, so I'm going to hold off on the CFR, but there's also a specific CFR definition of a statutory employee of a motor carrier, and I'm pretty sure that that now has been interpreted in a number of different courts to mean independent contractors as well. But I'll let you know after next Monday because we're going to make that statutory employee argument in front of a jury, right?
Awesome.
And what's going to happen is this, okay? So I've laid out there. We've tried to settle this case. We've told them this is a whatever. And what's going to happen is we're going to go in there and ask for a lot more money because why not? Why not? Because we know we're going to go up against an argument that if we get past that and the jury says, yeah, that guy's your employee, they're going to be angry that they've wasted their time, the jurors' time on this argument that they don't believe. And we're probably going to get that anger flow to get us a higher number. It's probably not what we ask for, but it's certainly going to be more than what we tried to negotiate a settlement to. And then you get right back into that very first scenario where you're like, we've got nuclear verdicts, we've got juries out of control. We don't. We really have some defendants and trucking companies who don't want to engage in a level of accountability. Right? So think about it. And that's the other part to it, right? Is if they wanted to do things appropriately and go get drivers that were licensed, right? They could, right? They could adequately make sure that the LLCs are engaging in appropriate regulatory compliance. They don't care because what they care about is nothing more than the speed of the delivery to the product from the warehouse to the customer. And that's it. And those are the only metrics that matter for them. And so in the great world of the cost benefit analysis, these judgments don't mean that much to the companies because first of all, they're insured. And second of all, they're making more money than they're paying out. Right. And that's what you're looking at. There's, some of these economic drivers are as old as dirt and they still haven't changed. And they're always going to be there. Right.
Right. On the question of jurors, you make a valid point that jurors are working with the information they have their own biases. Some might we all have biases against the general public. Some people feel that a jury might not have all the information. They might have this Smokey and the Bandit bias, and I want to get your sense for is there a process in place? Let's say a jury is impaneled on one of these cases for them to understand how this business works, right? Like how subcontracting works, how the acquisition of motor carrier numbers works, how these layers of LLCs operate. Is there some way to do that before they go into trial, or does this all happen during the trial?
So jurors are limited to making decisions about what evidence is placed in front of them. Right. And really what evidence is placed in front of them. So, for example, when we go and we argue that this is an LLC that's not an independent contractor, we need to produce the documents that support our position. So we have their contract, for example. We have the delivery schedule that this lady was on that she was making back and forth. Okay. We have certain testimony that we've obtained, and that's how juries get educated and make these decisions. And that's kind of part of it is that jurors have to be self-contained within that world where you have to anticipate maintaining a level of keeping them contained within the world because the only decision they can make is what's in front of them and what's been presented to them for those past couple of days. Now, you might get lucky. You might have somebody that comes in and is in the trucking world or in regulatory compliance and knows some information here and there, something along those lines. And that person might be selected for one reason or another. You may see like mechanics coming in on certain cases because the lawyers might think somebody with a technical knowledge comes in, because the jurors are allowed to come in with their personal knowledge from that standpoint. I mean, it's not like they have to leave everything they know by the door, but they can only consider the only evidence that's been placed in front of them. So it's not as if you're going to get beforehand jurors where you're saying, hey, this is a case about such and such. Let us give you a primer on X, Y, and Z. The primer theoretically is the trial.
Okay. So one of the things that my previous attorney guest said to me is that he would like to put himself out of business, that he would prefer there were not crashes, and that he had lots to do and would rather not have to deal with, families, death, bereavement, trying to fight for their clients and money and all that. And so what can we do to reduce or eliminate these crashes? And then we have, policies, things that are not being enforced, things that trucking companies aren't doing, things that the government is not doing. So, from your position as someone who's litigated these cases and seen the mechanics of how all this stuff works, laid it out for juries, laid it out in deliberations before going to court, to your mind, what are the factors? What are the policies? What are the things the government's not doing? What are things that could be done to take a big bite out of these incidents happening in the first place? Like where are things going wrong that we have bad actors or maybe the less responsible actors on the road that lead to these incidents?
Well, first of all, I don't ever think that we're never going to eliminate risk from society. Okay, let's just be very straightforward.
Oh no, of course. I don't
Yeah,
say to
I mean,
completely
yeah, sure,
eliminate it, but
yeah,
reduce.
right, reduce it. And the problems that you have in terms of safety, in terms of regulatory compliance that lead to bad actors on the roads, really start and end with um, the seriousness with which the motor carriers, owner operators, the people who are running the trucking companies want to maintain their businesses and the level of professionalism, because that sets the tone, right? It's the old expression, like the fish rots from, if the fish is bad, it's starting from the head on down. Okay. And so when you have a culture, for example, that doesn't stress safety, that shirks its compliance requirements about independent contractors, that really isn't getting to the point where they're auditing their independent contractors to figure out who are the drivers that they're hiring and whether or not they're qualified. When you have an organization that's going to go like that, you're going to have something that's going to happen and break down along those lines. Okay. Now, that's not to say that accidents can't happen to really well-run organizations. They can and they do. Okay, like I said, risk is mitigatable, but it is not avoidable. Okay, and so that's the first part about it. And what you're missing is you're missing a lot of compliance elements on behalf of governments. There's just not enough. Years ago, when they first let state police officers start enforcing DOT regulations, okay, you would see just teams of specialized uh, cops, sheriff's departments, city police departments on the side of any piece of highway that they had to pull over trucks, see if they couldn't hit you guys with a couple violations and generate some money, right? You don't see that so much anymore. You don't see that so much anymore. And that's unfortunate. I mean, it's not something the truck drivers want me to say, but that's unfortunate because that is one of the greatest ways that you had to ensure compliance of safety, was the fact that you had so many municipalities and governments that were motivated by making money, right? But it worked. Okay. And so the government has to be more involved. Okay. Like they have to be more serious about enforcing compliance, but they don't. I mean, the DOT is not nearly where it could be, and it's not really focused on some of these issues. And there's too much special interest in every bit of American politics.
Right.
Okay.
I would agree with that
That is
wholeheartedly.
that that part of it, when we were playing to insurance companies, okay, and you know, and special interests, okay, that's the trucking companies. That's the insurance carriers for the trucking company. The trucking companies don't want to have to do more safety. They don't want to have to do more compliance that costs them money. They want to make money. And I can appreciate that in their business models and all of it. But then working around regulations or rewriting all of that, that's a real problem, you know. Um, there's just a lot that could do. But at the root, this comes down to this. Professional drivers are professional drivers because in their DNA and who they are, that's the level of pride and the profession that they've chosen. And unprofessional drivers are unprofessional drivers because they don't care and they don't have that same passion. And so that's part of it as well, is having the right people behind the seats, somebody who wants to be passionate and who wants to give a shit. Okay. And those people make a difference also. So, there's just a lot to it. I don't think that this is something, first of all, I don't even think the industry is that bad. I don't think it's that unsafe. I don't think it's unprofessional, anything along those lines. There's not that many problems with it. There's a lot of things that could be fixed about it, right? There's a lot of things that could be avoided about it. There's a lot of things people don't want to admit about what's going on, okay? And there's a lot of worse stuff that's got the industry is tangentially evolved and surrounded with. There's trafficking, there's drug, all of that type of stuff, okay? But overall, most of the industry is really well run, really professional, really has a level of pride and passion. And that really is where the focus should be, right? Is on that and is on selling that as a brand, from an industry-wide perspective, as opposed to still reaching back and going like, man, I love Smokey and the Bandit, blah, 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 blah. No. This is not the 1970s, right? Because I want you to think about that. Smokey and the Bandit came out about that set, the early 80s. I mean, there was a counterculture going on in this country at the time. Don't forget, right? I mean, there was a movement. All of this stuff was going on. That is not where this country is now. People don't look at truck drivers, in the light of being professional because of the stereotypes that they've got. And the industry's biggest problem is the branding that you guys engage in, or that we engage in it from an
Right. Well,
industry-wide perspective.
I would push back just a little bit.
Okay.
Uh, so you made some great points here about passionate operators and people that are committed to doing their jobs properly, and most trucking companies are. I agree with that. I think one of the issues we've seen is that because the industry, like the freight market, there's just so many loads, as you mentioned earlier, so many loads going up and down the road. There's so much extra traffic. And a lot of companies that want stuff hauled, I think, don't really do a whole lot of due diligence. They go through these like freight brokers, these 3PLs that like find trucks. And then the freight brokers, to them, it's just like, hey, what's my rep? I'm going to find the cheapest truck possible.
Yep.
And there's just because of the layers of separation between people who want stuff moved and the guy ultimately hauling it, and because getting back to the government, I'm not sure what the answer is to this, because like we all pretend to be capitalists and free market people, but at some level we have a problem with brokers, many of whom are offshore and do not share in that professionalism or accountability. They're just like, sell loads, move it for us, get the cheapest truck possible. Various actors who've parasitized themselves on the business, many of whom, let's just put it, let's just dispense with being diplomatic here, not Americans, got here yesterday, ethnic gangsters of various descriptions who are just looking to like make money and then like abuse their homeboys that they bring here. And the government's just handing out CDLs to whoever. That's another big bugaboo of mine, is I don't think CDL standards are high enough, because the government is only testing you to pass a test. They're not testing you on whether you're passionate or whether you have a good attitude towards safety. It's, can you tick all these boxes? Can you do a simple pre-trip inspection and back the truck up 30 feet? Like, it's not enough. Would you agree with that?
Are you talking about specifically on the CDL element of it?
The CDL element of it, and the issue of motor carrier numbers, the ease with which brokers get into the business, and then we have
So,
all these connections.
so look, I mean, I'm not sure about the CDL requirements. I'm going to be honest with you, whether the testing here and there, you're looking for basic operation of a vehicle. You've got millions of people that you got to get, certified. You've got common denominators and education levels you've got to take into account. There's a lot to it. And by the way, you also have a shortage of truckers. Okay. So,
Not
and
true.
you
Not
don't think so?
true.
You don't think so?
Not true. Not true.
Well, according to
No,
the government, they think that there's a shortage of
not
truckers,
true.
right?
No, let me pill you on this, and hopefully
Okay.
this helps you in your
And then I'm
approach to
gonna
that.
And then I want to go back and I'm going to talk to you about the one thing that you did bring up that I think that has absolutely got to have more regulation and more touching, which is the brokers. I
Right.
mean, well, you know what? You're going to school me on the not true element of the numbers in just a second. Let's talk about brokers.
Right.
I
Right.
can tell there are so many people. What do you do? Oh, I broker truckloads. It's like I could wake up tomorrow and become a truck broker. I mean, it's that easy and whatever. It's so there are so many people trying to do it. They think it's just the easiest money, all of it. Sit in front of a computer, never meet people. I work for 4 hours. I broker these loads. All of it. And and by the way, it's once I've gotten paid. By the way, I don't worry about it anymore either, right? I mean, they don't care. um, and there's so much of it, and it's so unregulated, right? It's like so hands off, nobody really cares. The level of freight fraud is going up astronomically as a result of this, if you think about it, right? And it doesn't take much, but like a cell phone, a computer, and a hotel room, if you're really like getting to the most basic of it, right? A PO box that you can move next week as you move your fraud across the country, like enjoying the beach somewhere else and not taking this seriously. And there's a lot of brokers, you're right, they don't care and they don't look at trucking companies, and that makes it easier. So if I've got a trucking company and we're far, far out of compliance on an awful lot of things, we've got a regular amount of brokers that are just keeping to send us work. We don't care. So again, like, so that's the brokerage element of this business really, really is a problem on so many levels. Okay, the fraud, the lack of diligence on it, the lack of ability to really understand the contracting that's going on. There are so many different aspects of it that really, it's almost as if, I mean, there should be like higher standards for brokers, not
Right.
necessarily higher standards for CDL drivers, but higher standards for brokers.
Right. I would say both, but as far as the driver thing goes, myself and a number of other people and organizations are fighting a very difficult battle against this idea that there's a shortage of truck drivers because um, a corporate lobby group called the American Trucking Association has been running the table on this issue for decades. And they keep claiming, oh, there's a shortage of truck drivers. And then they repeat it to like your local TV news station. And there's a whole ecosystem.
Of PR.
Yeah,
Yeah.
PR, well, and government money. So I was actually just quoted. There's a advocacy group called the Owner Operator Independent Driver Association, and they just put out a white paper on this narrative, and they quoted me in it because I came up with this sort of pithy term to describe what's going on here, which is a system of stealth corporate welfare, which masks itself as a jobs program. And let me explain this. Since the 1980s, this all starts happening in the late 1980s. The big trucking companies have a hard time keeping drivers because after the Motor Carrier Act of 1980 passes, intense competition takes place, rates go down, trucking companies have to cut costs in a lot of places, so they start paying their drivers less and having them work harder. And so the drivers start quitting, right? It's like, hey, why am I going to work harder for less money? So at one time they did have a shortage, but what they've done is they've had a pretty good sleight of hand is they claim that there's a shortage of drivers. They go to the government and the government gives them money for truck driving schools. So they either subsidize students directly or they subsidize the schools. And this has been going on for decades. Nobody ever asks, where do the drivers go? So people are starting to notice this. And in the last few years, there's been numerous studies which look into how many CDLs there are that are active out there, right? Even the ATA in 2019 admitted that there was 10 million CDLs. Well, if there's only 2 million, 2.2 million long haul truck driving jobs, and there's 10 million CDLs, that tells you that there's 5 times as many. There's been other studies, some people, it's usually between 3 and 5 times as many CDLs exist as there are jobs for them, right? So the problem is not that there's a shortage of truckers, it's that they keep quitting. So there's a churn and retention problem, right? And what ends up happening is that the claim that there's not enough drivers is used to finance truck driving schools. And then those new drivers get into the business, discover that they've been sold a bill of goods about what trucking actually is and how much it's going to pay, all the hours you lose that you don't get paid for. The job's actually really hard, and then they quit. So only like people who are really into trucking, like myself, will stick with it, find the niches that pay and stay. But like the sort of the truckload long distance part of the market has just had this churn and retention problem for decades. And it is in many ways subsidized by the taxpayer. And in order to keep getting that subsidized taxpayer money, they have to keep telling people that there's a shortage of drivers instead of accurately calling it a retention problem. Now, this is connected to what you do because who gets in accidents? There was a study done by Virginia Tech that showed, which basically proves common sense, that newer rookie drivers get in more accidents than experienced drivers, right? If you have more experience, you know how to drive better, you can read traffic patterns better, you're less likely to get in an incident. Well, the driver shortage narrative, which is used, again, to get money from the government to train new drivers all the time, puts more new drivers on the road who are more likely to get involved in crashes, right? So I've written on this. I'll have to send you some articles that explain this more. But like part of your business is newer rookie drivers, be they in cars or trucks. And on the truck side of it, there's more rookie drivers because everybody believes there's a shortage. And there isn't. They just don't keep the ones they already have because they don't want to pay more. They don't want to respect the driver. The industry doesn't want to fix those parts and aspects of the industry that cause people to leave because that might cost more money.
Well, no, I totally agree with that. We've had so many calls from drivers or people who've gone through the schools, or in those captured like first year or all of it, trying to get out of the programs, being threatened with costs and all of this nonsense. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and when you put it into that context, I can see where you're coming from. So the next question that my curiosity is that first organization that you mentioned that drives the narrative that you're talking about, uh, who funds it? Who makes up that association?
So the American Trucking Association, well, they're funded by their members.
Sure.
But
Who are their members, right?
you have to look deeper though. Their
Sure,
members
of course.
are very large trucking companies,
Of
but
course.
those very large trucking companies serve very large producers of products in the United States who want to keep their transportation costs as low as possible.
Sure.
They cannot determine what the price of tires or equipment or diesel is. They have no way to control that. The only thing they can control is how
Is the
much they
labor
pay, is the
cost.
labor cost.
Yeah.
So they have an incentive to take their members' dues, go to Washington and say, we don't have enough drivers. We need the taxpayer to help us pay for truck driving schools. We need CDL requirements to be kept to a minimum so we can keep finding these people. The whole thing's a mess, and this is part of the book I'm writing. And when people understand that more, and again, you're an attorney, you're dealing with these crashes, you must see that like there's a certain amount of the people getting involved here. There's a lot of people that get into trucking who probably didn't want to. It was sort of an occupation of last resort. Maybe they were on unemployment. Maybe they got talked into it. Like there's a lot of truckers in trucking now who are not like truckers, qua truckers. Like you get what I'm saying?
Hmm. I get it. Yeah. They
Yeah.
see it as an opportunity. I can go buy a truck and get somebody to drive it for me. You know, um, it's interesting. These large companies, they do mill people through. There's very few large companies that I see, and there are some that keep, and they've got some long-term drivers here and there, along those lines. But they turn people over. I totally agree with you. There's a significant turn and burn, and there's a constant pipeline of people coming through, and part of it is people just think it's easy, right? All right, good. I can get up there and drive a truck. It's just easy, but it's not. Um, but if you go beyond the truck accidents, all of these new people also lack the iterations of working in other people's places, making deliveries, and ensuring their own safety. To be honest with you, some of the most catastrophic accidents that we see in this part of, from this standpoint, are not the trucking accidents with the truck drivers involved. It's on third party property catastrophic accidents that the truck drivers never saw the hazard coming. They just didn't have any appreciation for what was about to happen to them for some reason. Because that part of it's not ever trained, by the way. Right? There's no real training on that part.
No, no,
Okay.
you're right. Yeah, you could be at a customer facility. You're dealing with equipment and forklifts and people and
Yeah.
different terrain, different products around different environments. Like when you're a new driver and you go through one of these CDL mills, you do your 3 or 4 or 6 week course. Then they throw you off the deep end, being like a long distance over the road driver, and you're just going to all kinds of different facilities all over the country that you've got no clue about. You've never been to.
So I will tell you, I in the past, this is just the first one that comes to mind. In the past 3 years, we've probably spoken to at least five truck drivers within the first 5 months of working on their own, all of whom have fallen off the back of the trailer for some reason they never anticipated that that's what could happen. I mean, it's astounding to me. You're standing on a trail on the back of an open trailer. Of course, it's something that happens to you. They just never thought somebody could jostle the trailer with a forklift backing up into it, and off they go. Or, I'm trying to think of the other one. I think he was on the back of the trailer, and the guy in the tractor started maneuvering the truck to get back into the loading dock. I mean, and off he went. I mean, all of these things happen. People, you don't see it coming. So the training is off. I totally will agree with you on that. And a lot of the problem with the training academies, by the way, is it operates as a profit center for the carriers. Okay. Like all of that money coming in, all of that subsidy, those contracts that require you to repay that money if you don't make it through your probationary period, it's because it does become a profit center for them.
Yeah, and it's not just the government, right? Like the government does subsidize this to a point, but some of the other methods that they use is they basically indenture you. You're a student, we give you a loan. Okay, it costs $7,000 to take our course. You don't have
Yeah.
7 grand, no problem. Here's the 7 grand, but
You're going to
28
work it off.
28% interest.
Yeah.
If you don't work for us for a year or whatever, that interest rate goes up. There's penalties for quitting. There's penalties for not paying on time. Like they grab you.
Yeah, and and then the other way to go do it is you've got for-profit schools, right? And they've got their own incentives for doing it. It is an industry where you do have to be trained into it, right? I mean, you do have to be able to you do have to get some type of training behind the wheel of a big rig. They've got you on that element of things. And there's very few motor carriers that really have any real apprentice programs for it.
No, they are very few in number. I was very lucky to work for a small family-owned company that taught me correctly, and I would like to see that model propagated throughout the rest of the industry. Mr. Citron, I've kept you for quite a while here. I know you've probably got to go. Do you have any sort of final parting thoughts? Like, do you have any advice for either carriers or drivers how to best protect yourself, especially like out on the road insurance wise? God forbid you do get involved in an incident and ends up requiring your services. What are some things people should do or be thinking about?
Well, I mean, I think that, I think the companies, owner operators, people that are serious about growing their businesses, I think that they need to make sure that they're in regulatory compliance. They've got good insurance programs in place, and that they've got a good business plan and culture model to ensure success. I mean, one of the things that we do here with Long Haul Law is we've got a fractional general counsel program. It's really a subscription-based program where we become your in-house lawyers for you. And so we'll help you negotiate your insurance contracts with you. We'll help you like negotiate your brokerage deals or ensure that you're maintaining regulatory compliance. We'll advise you through those issues. And one of the things that people don't like about lawyers is the concept of paying us by the hour, right? And that every time you pick up the phone to your lawyer, it costs money. So you don't want to talk to us. We've taken that out by just having a flat rate on something like that. And the reason that we're doing that is to lower that barrier. We want clients to talk to us. Because that is one of the reasons that they don't engage in that regulatory compliance is it just costs too much for them. Okay. And so that's one aspect of it is to start sitting there and um, really evaluate what it is that you're doing and what the costs are of the business and how to manage those appropriately with what you want to be in terms of a corporate actor or citizen within your community, right? I mean, that's what this all comes down to. You can be a professional driver or you can be a cowboy, right? And it comes down to your mentality and what you're doing and who you are. And that never is going to change about people, okay? So the best advice is really, follow the regulatory framework, follow the laws that are required of you, and the laws will protect you if you do so, even against like attorneys that, the laws will eventually get these cases through the processes appropriately, right? But the best advice that I would give anybody who's a truck driver is be as professional as possible. Any corporation, any motor carrier, be as great a corporate citizen as you possibly can be, and that way you can go to bed every night knowing that you're being responsible. That's my thought process, right? I mean, that is accountability. That's what we talked about a little while ago. That is accountability. It's self accountability. And I don't think that there's enough of it. So maybe my closing thought would be if we could all be more accountable to ourselves, we would be more accountable to the community as a whole, right?
That's a great way to end it, sir.
All right. Well, I've enjoyed it. It's been a fun talk, right?
Yeah. How do people find you online, sir?
I hope they find me online. No, they go to longhaullaw.com and there's a place that they can fill out for us, and there's the phone number there, and we'll be right back to you, help you out, whether it's the fractional general counsel program you want to talk to us about us being your in-house lawyer type of thing, or you've got a question, anything about that the truck drivers want to ask us about. Either we can help you out or we know people in our industry that can help you out, and we're happy to send you, to somebody that, for example, down that does property damage claims, because we don't do property damage claims. We don't do out of time claims, but she does, and she does them really well. And we're happy to get you right over to one of our partners. So we like to think of ourselves as a clearinghouse for people, right? No question is too crazy. We've seen a lot of crazy situations. Longhaullaw.com, and you'll, I think, be surprised and pleasantly at the experience that you have with us, right? That is part of it too, is for lawyers is to take down the barrier of it and make it a more natural process for people, a very non-judgmental and easy flow in terms of client experience.
Right. All right, sir.
Okay.
Well, thanks very much for that, and way of the road.